Hey, Arcfieldweather.com meteorologist Paul Dorian here on Thursday morning, November the 14th. Really two main stories in the world of weather this morning I'd like to talk about in this video discussion. One is an update on the tropical system that is forming over the Caribbean Sea. We're very late in the season. This could be the last hurrah, but we'll have to wait and see on that. And then we'll talk about some incoming cold shots into the central and eastern states for the latter part of the month, really beginning later next week and right through Thanksgiving week. Looks like an early preview of winter in many parts of the central and eastern states. Quite a transition from perhaps the ending of the Atlantic Basin tropical season to a colder pattern with cold air masses charging to the south and east from Canada into the central and eastern U.S., again during the latter part of the month of November. This is the latest official forecast map by NOAA's National Hurricane Center. The tropical system is not yet named. If it does become indeed a tropical storm, a named tropical storm, it would be Sarah, and that very likely will happen over the next 12 to 24 hours or so. Again, the potential is pretty high for reaching tropical storm status. However, at that point, the good news here is that it looks like it'll continue on a westward track over the next few days, like skirting the northern coastline of Central America, and then move over the Yucatan Peninsula region of Mexico. Now, this extended period of an encounter with land masses of Central America, Yucatan Peninsula region of Mexico is good in the sense that it will keep it in a weakened state. Significant intensification beyond tropical storm status is unlikely due to this encounter with the land mass over the next several days. Maybe early next week it'll emerge off the coastline of the Yucatan Peninsula region and enter the Gulf of Mexico. And it is at this point, early to middle part of next week, that it will become increasingly influenced by a deepening upper level trough over the central U.S. I do feel pretty confident that once it enters the Gulf, it'll take a turn to the north and east due to the influence of that upper level trough. Basically, southwesterly flow of air will develop overhead, turning this to the north and east towards Florida. But the good news is it certainly looks like it'll begin, at least over the Gulf of Mexico, in a relatively weakened state. We'll have to just continue to monitor this system over the next several days. Well, I wanted to next take a look at the 500 millibar pattern, both with respect to its influence on this tropical system in the near term, really over the next 5 to 10 days or so, and then in the longer term, with cold air intrusions likely into the central and eastern U.S. beginning as early as late next week and lasting likely right through Thanksgiving week to the end of the month of November. These are 5-day averages of the 500 millibar height anomaly pattern here. This is the current 5-day period we're looking at right here using the ensemble run of the GFS from last night. So let's move forward and just see how this evolves over the next 5, 10, 15 days here. Here's the next 5-day period, and then we're going out into the latter part of the weekend, into the early and middle part of next week. And notice right here, we have this developing, deepening trough system right in the central part of the U.S. Again, this is for a 5-day period extending from the 17th to the 22nd. The winds over the Gulf of Mexico as a result of this incoming deepening upper level trough will largely be from a southwesterly direction. So any kind of a tropical system that indeed emerges off the Yucatan Peninsula region will become increasingly under the influence of that southwesterly flow aloft as that trough deepens across the central U.S. In other words, it'll take a turn to the north and east towards the state of Florida. Now, let's move forward in time here. Notice also by the latter part of next week, we have this high latitude blocking here. That's what the purples represent. Way off the scales here in terms of the heights compared to normal. Very, very strong high pressure sitting over northern Canada, Greenland. This is something we watch for during the winter season, what we refer to as high latitude blocking, and that in turn is a more favorable overall pattern for cold air intrusions from Canada into the central and eastern U.S. We often talk about looking out for high pressure ridging over southeastern Canada during the tropical season, because tropical systems can undercut it to the south and have an impact Gulf of Mexico region. Well, similarly, you have high latitude blocking here over stationed over northern Canada, Greenland. You can have a deep upper level trough undercutting it to the south, and indeed this is a winter looking pattern here, again becoming established later next week and going likely right through the following week, which is Thanksgiving week. Deep upper level trough here, high latitude blocking to the north, go a little bit farther in time, and this again continues with the blocking ridge over northern Canada, Greenland, and still some trough showing up here all the way out days 10 to 14. Now we're right around Thanksgiving time here, the 23rd to the 28th of November. So quite an interesting pattern here for the latter part of November, and perhaps an early preview of winter in much of the central and eastern U.S. Now, how does that 500 millibar height anomaly pattern affect the temperatures? Well, here are the 850 millibar temperature anomalies, again averaged over 5-day periods. This is the current 5-day period we are in, with much above normal temperatures over Canada as we begin this look ahead here. Now we'll move forward here, and as that high latitude blocking gets better established, at the same time a deep upper level trough deepens, intensifies over the central U.S. You can see this colder than normal air averaged over a 5-day period. This is out now days 6 to 10, the 19th to the 24th, setting up here. It's not unusual when you have very high heights or very high pressure over northern Canada to see above normal temperatures underneath that high pressure ridging. But to the south here, we're starting to see that pattern change with cold air intrusion from Canada into the central U.S. and ultimately into the eastern U.S. We go out another 5 days. This is now the 21st to the 26th, days 8 to 12. Thanksgiving week we're talking about here, well below normal temperatures on average for this particular 5-day time period from the central states all the way to the east coast. We'll go out a little bit farther in time, and it's kind of sticks around here. We have still below normal temperatures averaged over a 5-day period all the way to the end of the month of November. Now we're looking at the 25th to the 30th. This encompasses the Thanksgiving Day holiday, still showing some above normal heights or pressures over northern Canada and Greenland. Again, kind of a winter looking pattern here, latter part of November for the central and eastern U.S. Now those prior maps were for the North America viewpoint. This is back to the continental U.S. viewpoint. Now this is not the ensemble run of the GFS, but the conventional version of the GFS from last night at 0Z. We're looking at the surface maps, and first of all, notice quite a healthy system here crossing over the Ohio Valley today. But watch what happens. The mid-Atlantic regions can certainly use some more rainfall. We finally broke the dry streak, the record dry streak in places like D.C., Philadelphia, New York City last week, but we need a lot more rain to make up for what has been a very dry couple of months here. This system moves to the east, and it does indeed produce some shower activity, but primarily to the south of the Mason-Dixon line, the Pennsylvania-Maryland border. You can see right here, D.C. will indeed get some decent rainfall later today into tonight, but boy, if you're in Philadelphia to New York City, very little, if any, out of this system. Watch what happens here. The low pressure area just kind of dives to the south and east, and it just doesn't penetrate into the Philly to New York City corridor with rainfall. There certainly can be a decent amount of rainfall south of the Pennsylvania-Maryland border, places like D.C., Delmarva Peninsula. The heaviest rain here will be right along the Carolina coastline as low pressure intensifies there. But again, kind of a mixed picture here for the Mid-Atlantic region, with the southern Mid-Atlantic region getting in on some well-needed much needed rainfall later today and tonight, but places from Philly to New Jersey, New York City, very little, if any, rain. Now, that system, again, drops to the south and east, limiting its rainfall to the southern mid-Atlantic region, and then pushes off the coast as we begin the upcoming weekend. It looks like a pretty decent weekend for this time of the year across much of the eastern half of the nation. Notice these isobars are quite tight here as of Saturday morning. The combination of strong high pressure over the Great Lakes and low pressure off the New England coastline and also off the mid-Atlantic coastline, well off the mid-Atlantic coastline. In other words, a strong flow of air in this fashion here. The winds will be quite noticeable, both on Friday and Saturday in the mid-Atlantic region in the northeast U.S., but it'll be accompanied by dry conditions here, both on Saturday and Sunday. We'll go out a little bit farther in time and then kind of focus our attention also on the tropics as we edge into the early part of next week. And here we go. We start to see some rainfall here by the early part of next week, and this likely is whatever remains after its encounter with Central America and the Yucatan Peninsula region, which is right here, that peninsula region of Mexico. Here is likely a tropical storm in this particular time period. Again, if it reaches tropical storm status, it would be named Sarah. And then, because of that increasing southwesterly flow aloft, whatever does emerge out over the southern Gulf of Mexico is liable to move all of a sudden towards Florida in a northeast direction. That same pattern has kind of repeated many times this tropical season. And here we go. Very well could end up being quite a heavy rainmaker for the Florida Gulf Coast. Certainly not something to write off at this particular time. Again, the good news is it will cross over land and enter the Gulf of Mexico in a relatively weakened position, likely limiting its intensification prospects down the road. Nonetheless, can be quite a rain producer for Florida's Gulf Coast, let's say by about the middle part of next week. Right here, this particular model run has it encountering the Gulf Coast of Florida sometime by the middle of next week. Now, at the same time, cold air starting to charge to the south and east from Canada into the central U.S. We saw that upper level forecast sequence of maps with deepening trough and intensifying trough over the central states, and that's accompanied by this cold air intrusion again from Canada into the central U.S. Now, this kind of a scenario is not all that unusual in that it's not uncommon for the end of the Atlantic Basin tropical season to kind of be a pattern-changing event in that perhaps the last hurrah, the last tropical system ultimately moves off to the north and east, and on its backside, cold air intrusions all of a sudden dominate the weather scene across the central and eastern U.S. Hurricane Sandy was a classic case of this scenario unfolding back in 2012. Hurricane Sandy, as you may recall, made landfall in New Jersey towards the end of October in 2012. It took this kind of a path here, then turned right into New Jersey at the end of October 2012. Now, not only did cold air move in on its backside in similar fashion from the northwest to the southeast, but cold air actually wrapped into that system, and places in West Virginia actually ended up with as much as 3 feet of snow during the Hurricane Sandy event as cold air poured in on its backside and actually wrapped into the system. Places along the Skyline Drive, if you're familiar with that in West Virginia, ended up with as much as 3 feet of snow during Hurricane Sandy. And then the month of November, kind of a pattern-changing event, turned out to be colder than normal throughout much of the eastern third of the nation, really everywhere from, let's say, the Mississippi River on east in November of 2012. Well, this certainly will not be a Hurricane Sandy type of tropical event, but indeed, as it moves off to the north and east, it could be kind of a pattern-changing event here where colder air masses dominate the scene across the central and eastern U.S. during the latter part of November, probably right through Thanksgiving week. Now, let's go out a little bit farther in time. Certainly, with this cold air intrusion, there very likely will be some accumulating snow. And here is what remains of that tropical system pushing off the southeast U.S. coastline. This is about a week from right now, next Thursday, the 21st of November, and a lot of cold air driving to the south and east at this particular time. And this will not be the first of the cold air shots. Here comes another cold air shot right here. This is kind of the core of this next shot of cold air here. And we're talking about the end of next week, moving into the northern plains. Again, continuing on that northwest to southeast trajectory. Here is perhaps remnants of that tropical system here, and again, kind of a pattern-changing event with multiple cold air shots coming in behind it towards the latter part of November. We'll move out even farther in time here. Here we go all the way out to the weekend before Thanksgiving week here to Sunday, the 24th, and this is a cold air mass right here throughout much of the central and eastern U.S. So kind of an interesting scenario unfolding here with this perhaps the last tropical system of the Atlantic Basin season. Likely to become Tropical Storm Sarah, but then it'll have an extended period, an extended encounter with land masses of Central America, Yucatan Peninsula region of Mexico, limiting its intensification prospects in the near term. Likely emerges over the Gulf of Mexico next week and then turns to the north and east towards Florida. Certainly we'll have to keep an eye on it. Could become a big-time rainmaker for the Florida Gulf Coast. And then the overall pattern changes to colder and colder, with multiple cold shots moving from Canada into the central and eastern U.S., really beginning later next week and continuing right to the end of the month of November. That's it for now. For ArcfieldWeather.com, this has been meteorologist Paul Dorian.